For this next panel, I'd like to call on my colleague, Julia Manchester, political reporter at The Hill. Julia, it's all yours.
Thanks, Steve. President Biden announced earlier this month that the United States will have enough vaccine doses by the end of May for each adult in America. This is 2 months earlier than originally thought possible. So what does this mean for the manufacturers, raw material providers, production and packaging teams? How is the government working with private industry to ensure this goal can be met? Kirk is the Executive Vice President of Manufacturing and Technical Operations at Emergent BioSolutions, one of the companies manufacturing the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. And Cody is principal at ZS Associates, where he works with healthcare and life sciences companies to solve strategy issues. He leads ZS's COVID Vaccine and Treatment Center of Excellence, where he advises manufacturers who are developing assets specific to COVID-19 and other diseases. Thank you both for being here, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much. And so to get started, Sean, I'd like to pose this question to you first. We've seen that the production schedule really has been ramped up in the wake of COVID-19 for vaccine manufacturers. So I just wanted to get your take on how do these manufacturers ensure safety and quality if they're working on such a shortened, ramped up schedule?
You know, it's a great question, and I was just thinking about Dr. Blair's comments in the prior session. They really were very accurate with respect to the monumental effort that has gone in across the industry and with regulators in partnership to do this in a very safe and compliant manner. We are moving quickly, but we are moving quickly hand in hand with both the regulators and with the clients and the U.S. government. Moving at a quick rate does not mean that we will jeopardize in any way, shape, or form the safety of these products. And we're applying the same level of control, the same level of rigor, and the same level of procedures that we would do during non-pandemic times.
Right. And Cody, to you, I know that there's probably lots of changes that have to be made in the manufacturing process when it's ramped up to this extent. So I just wanted to get your take on really what goes into the ramping up of that process and how does it change?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe there's a few different dimensions when people think about ramping up. I think people obviously are focused first and foremost on the production process itself. Before that can even happen, there's a whole set of work that has to go in to even sourcing the raw materials. So, of course, that's the actual components of the vaccine itself, but it's also how it's going to be administered. So, for example, getting vials, literally enough glass to be able to fill with vaccine, then ultimately syringes and needles, et cetera, to inject. So the whole production process kind of starts with obviously the development of vaccines and so forth, bringing it through trials. But really the vaccine is one important component of it, but the other parts are equally important to make sure we have vial supply, syringe supply, and so forth.
Right. And, I've got to say, I know that for many of us living through this pandemic, it seems like a year has been a lifetime. But for me as a layperson looking at this process, really these four vaccines, I should say, if we include AstraZeneca, have been produced rather quickly. Sean, I'm going to put this one to you. What's the biggest challenge to operating in such a shortened time frame?
You know, Cody's articulation was very accurate. We have been working very diligently since signing our contracts with AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson because we are the primary supplier of all of their bulk drug substance destined for the U.S. population, and we're the global partner for Johnson & Johnson as well. We have really been ramping up in partnership with the federal COVID response team to get those materials, to get prioritized access, to partner with key suppliers who are also rallying to the cause in an amazing way. So the biggest challenge has been that. It's been getting a large enough labor force, getting the materials on hand, getting the equipment in place, getting it qualified, validated, and highly compliant, back to your prior question, to ensure that we're doing this in a repeated fashion as safe and effectively as possible. The ramp has been significant and it's been compressed. Dr. Baer's comments were, much to this effect. We have compressed an amazing amount of work into a span of 7 or 8 months, but we've accomplished a lot. And just simply the magnitude of the lift has been the most significant challenge. But our people have stood strong and they've rallied to the cause.
Right. And we're so thankful to those workers that have been able to produce these vaccines so quickly. We know they're making so many lives better. Cody, to the point on the manufacturing vaccines on a massive commercial scale, I mean, this is the first time we've really seen this happen in such a short time frame. So I just wanted to get your take on really what you're hearing from clients as to, what their biggest challenge with this is, and, what are the things that they don't necessarily even know yet when it comes to this kind of, process.
Yeah, I think the challenge is maybe twofold. Maybe on the development end first, I think it's easy to think of the virus as kind of static. It's actually itself dynamic. So obviously a lot of the focus right now is thinking one step ahead, particularly with the South African variant. If that one were to go and become much more widespread, how prepared are we to address variant-specific concerns? And so therefore they're worried first and foremost about producing enough vaccine to satisfy the wild type and other vaccine variants of concern. But really, if you had to go to another one, what would that other one look like? I think second, on the manufacturing end, I think, as you can imagine, a lot of the early government assistance to help do some of the build out at risk, meaning be able to advance production before clinical trials were completed, was hugely important. Obviously, going forward, a lot more of the scale up would be about adding more capacity to come online, even more at risk, so to speak, particularly if there's additional variant boosters required. So I think from a manufacturer perspective, just essentially some degree of certainty, either on the underlying nature of the virus itself, as well as where that capacity is going to come from. I think manufacturers are constantly trying to be able to isolate and mitigate those risks.
Right. And we're seeing that now there's starting to be testing with children getting the vaccine. So that's a whole other portion of the population that we're going to be looking at. So Cody, you mentioned government intervention and helping to really speed along that process. Do you anticipate the government to get more involved at this next stage, or do you think this is something the manufacturers can do on their own?
So some companies have already obviously announced their plans for pediatric vaccine. I think the exact details really are vaccine manufacturer specific, their ability to do that depending on their knowledge and understanding of the technology and the trial data to date. I think obviously in terms of achieving herd immunity targets, if you do the math, a lot of them, depending on what you assume is the threshold, would need to include children. So I think just from a public health standpoint, I think you would look to see different government entities actively involved, just for the sole reason that if everyone's kind of managed to a herd immunity target, that you would need sufficient pediatric population immunized to be able to reach that, unless you felt that the target essentially was low enough where an adult-only population would get you there.
Right. And Sean, when it comes to that Johnson & Johnson vaccine, we've heard that there is some skepticism among the population that because it has a lower efficacy rate than Pfizer or Moderna, there is some skepticism about it, and we know it's only one shot. And obviously, we know that people should get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine if presented with it. We've heard that from numerous medical experts. But I just wanted to get your take. I know it's one shot now, but do you foresee a booster shot in the future with this vaccine?
Yeah, so our role here at Emergent is being the manufacturer for Johnson & Johnson. The questions that you ask are very important questions. They're probably best directed toward J&J. But what I will say is that from my perspective, having spent a long time in the industry, it's an amazing vaccine. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, it was a significant clinical trial across a very diverse population and incorporated some of the exposure to variants. It is single shot. It's refrigerated distribution, and it's very, very impressive. And we're proud as an organization to be the manufacturer for the U.S. For that vaccine, and we believe that vaccine is going to play a critical role in beating this pandemic domestically and abroad.
Absolutely. And I think we have an audience question coming up from Julie Kimbrough that I'll allow her to pose.
Hi, I'm Julie Kimbrough, Vice President of Marketing, Communications, and Public Affairs at the National Kidney Foundation. My question is, how can this manufacturing collaboration translate into better, faster treatments made available for patients with chronic or incurable diseases? Thank you.
And I'll let you both answer that, starting with Cody.
Yeah, I think this whole process has challenged a lot of traditional paradigms. I think first on the development end, and then certainly on the manufacturing end as well. So on the development end, I think the collaboration, just being so lockstep between industry and regulators, I think does not go unnoticed by anyone on either side. I think that has accelerated things significantly. And I think it's heightened essentially the awareness that there are ways that we can safely develop things if we put our mind and our resources to it, maybe on an accelerated timeline that we hadn't thought about before. just by virtue of essentially the level of collaboration, being able to work much more closely together and doing things such as government assistance that essentially allowed companies to be able to do things at risk that they otherwise would not be able to afford to do. I think certainly on the manufacturing end, and Sean probably can speak to more of this here, but it does unlock significant value there too, right? So to actually bring manufacturing online also requires airtight integration with regulators to be able to meet some of the targets that have been fairly ambitious pre-pandemic, but now it's amazing enough that we're here. So I think it has raised the bar for many, many diseases that have been untreated for many years in development for new therapeutics, as well as vaccines that we could probably accomplish more based on the paradigm, the things that we've learned here.
Thank you so much, Sean. I'm sorry we don't have enough time to get to you. We're on a bit of a tight schedule, but thank you so much to you both, gentlemen, for all of your insights. We are so thankful for these manufacturer workers and the companies.
Thank you. Proud to be playing the role.